afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. Another MMFM Digital. I'm your host, JL Martinez. As always, brought to you by Camacol and the Miami Media and Film Market. Always a good shout out to our president, Joe Chi, as well as my partner in crime, Patty Arias, who does all the great behind the scenes work and is just a wonderful partner to have. A conference and now this wonderful new digital platform where we can bring you all these interesting guests on a weekly basis. Today's guest is very interesting. I'm so proud to announce our special interview today is Kate O'Hare, a veteran entertainment journalist who's written for some big outlets, including Variety and the Tribune Syndicate. She's now the social media manager for Family Theater Productions. We're going to talk about her new film, show the trailer, and bring her out very shortly. But first, as always, we like to talk about industry news, the big news making the rounds in Hollywood this week. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, most known for their famous and iconic Oscar ceremony, has announced a brand new diversity initiative for all Best Picture category nominees in the very near future. But some are thinking, with the closing of theatrical windows and the rise of very powerful streaming platforms, it could be too little too late. Kind of like finally inviting your neighbor to that family barbecue, but only after Uncle Willie has had 3 helpings. Daddy, is he gonna eat more sausage? I don't know, son, but if he goes for the doggy bag, he's out of here. And speaking of family, I am introducing a brand new segment before we bring in our guest, Kate O'Hare. It's called Ask a Kid a Movie Question. Today, it will be featuring my youngest daughter, Layla Martinez, where I will ask her a single movie question. Layla? That's your cue, sweetie. Come on over. Okay, so, well, there she is. All right, Layla. This is Ask a Kid a Movie Question. I'm going to ask you one question about a movie. Are you ready, Layla? Layla, what is your favorite movie?
Pocahontas.
Okay, why is Pocahontas your favorite movie?
Because that's under tree.
Because there's trees. That's a good reason to like a movie. And the tree talks. And she's a grandma, right? We love grandmas. Okay, and we love movies. And obviously we love Pocahontas. Thank you, Layla. We'll bring you back for another edition of Ask a Kid a Movie Question very soon. You've been great. Okay, and now, without further ado, the theatrical trailer for Prey. I'm so excited to show you this, and then we're going to bring Kate O'Hare right after that to talk about the movie and her life journey in show business.
If I were to tell you this story, you say, you're a liar. Seriously, you can't make it up. You really cannot make it up. It's as simple as that.
A crowd estimated at 500,000 people gathered today in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. Father Patrick Payton drew the largest crowd in the history of San Francisco.
I'd like to speak to you about a remarkable man, Father Patrick Payton.
Father Patrick Payton.
Patrick Payton.
Father Patrick Payton.
Father Patrick Payton. I know a man who has dedicated his life to teaching others what prayer can do.
People try to describe Father Payton, and it's almost like trying to carry water in your hands. It slides through.
It was almost unbelievable. You'll be looking around and all these people are here to listen to him.
The energy level was like somebody who was superhuman.
You might be saying with your voice, Hail Mary, full of grace, but your heart is telling God just what I said. Dear God, I love you.
People would be in tears listening to him because he had such a powerful voice. It was just unreal to think that a young boy from the parish was mingling with all the film stars.
He never came back with an American accent. He was always Irish.
He was capable of anything, apparently. We didn't know it at the time.
I want to talk to you about my dear friend and mentor, Father Patrick Payton.
He was a little bit of a brat when he was a teenager. You know, he was no saint, let me tell you.
I'm for God, for peace, for justice, mercy, truth, love.
He might have gotten knocked down, but he always got up.
I'm for stronger homes and loftier lives and the better use of time.
It was uncanny now, the way that people reacted to his voice. It surely was coming from God.
But first of all, I'm for prayer. Family prayer.
The family that prays together stays together.
All righty. Hi, Kate.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, definitely. We're glad to have you. But yeah, just saw that beautiful trailer for Prey. Before we jump into your story, talk a little bit about that film and how folks can see it.
Well, I went to work for Family Theater Productions in 2016, and I didn't even know who Father Payton was, which is strange because he's from the west of Ireland. My family's from the west of Ireland. He started his career in America, in Albany, New York, and I'm from an hour north of Albany. He came out to LA and he landed at Good Shepherd Parish in Beverly Hills, and that's my parish in Beverly Hills. So we intersected in all these weird ways. And then we were producing this documentary about him, and it blew my mind. It's like, who is this? He's like the most famous guy you've never heard of. He was like doing radio dramas and TV specials with the biggest stars in Hollywood. You saw a few of them in the trailer. There's plenty more, Frank Sinatra, all sorts of other people, and TV specials with them, and doing these huge rallies around the world. But he never really had a TV series, like Bishop Sheen, and he does it on TV a lot, like Billy Graham. So he kind of faded from the public eye, but the company's come roaring back. We're still in the same location where he founded us on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood.
Wow.
Since 1947. We're still producing. We're doing this documentary. We did a movie last year called The Dating Project. We have a sports documentary called The House That Rob Built, and other things in development, including a holiday movie, a Christmas movie that I wrote.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, lots of exciting things are happening. Yeah. And I think Father Payton would be pleased.
Absolutely. And so it says in theaters, so it will be available theatrically.
It is. We're actually finalizing the number of theaters. I was on a call this morning. It looks like we're going to have some theaters in the Miami area.
Great.
So, yeah, cross your fingers that you'll be able to see it in Miami. And then after the theatrical window, probably after the first of the year, it'll be available for streaming, and for screenings and stuff. But it's like, I can't believe that I never heard of this guy. It's amazing how some people persist in the media and some didn't. But he was just like a totally humble guy.
Yeah.
And he just wanted to promote family prayer. That was his thing, family unity.
And so that slogan, the family that prays together stays together, did you come up with that?
That was his. Yeah, everybody knows that.
Absolutely.
Now we're going to reintroduce you to the man behind it. And I'm the social media manager at Family Theater Productions. So I'm running the Facebook page, the Instagram, the Twitter for the company and for the movie, creating graphics. We're producing short videos. So if you go to Pray the Film, all one word, Pray the Film on Facebook or Pray the Film on Instagram, you can see a lot of that. I've been writing some press releases and a lot of other materials. And so it's fun kind of seeing the whole promotion business from the other side. After having been so long a recipient of promotional efforts. Now I'm like a purveyor.
Yeah, no, you're right. It definitely is interesting kind of seeing it from that angle. And obviously you're a lady of many talents, and I'm sure using a lot of them now. But just to kind of take a step back and talk a little bit about yourself. So, Kate, you mentioned you're originally from the Albany area. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I'm from actually an hour north of Albany, a small town between two resorts, right between Lake George and Saratoga Springs. A lot of people have been to one or the other. They've either, had a fun time in Lake George or lost a lot of money at the track in Saratoga.
Right.
And I moved to Saratoga, and that's where I was before I came out to LA in the early 2000s when I was working for the Tribune Syndicate. I came out to work in the offices of our online entertainment news site. And I've been doing a lot. I've been doing like working remotely, original remote work from northern New York State, doing phone interviews and things. And I got to do a few visits to TV sets and things in New York and New Jersey. When I came out here, I knew I wanted to do a lot of that. I wanted to be on set with people.
Absolutely.
So I've done a lot of visits to sets and locations in the U.S., Panama, a lot of time in Canada. And all types of shows, movies, reality shows, documentaries, sitcom dramas. I think I've been on every studio lot in Los Angeles, and that barely qualify as studio lots.
Sure.
So it's been interesting.
And so when did you guys kind of get that first inkling that you wanted to be a writer or have that as a career path?
Oh, I started writing, I think, as soon as I knew language. I think I wrote my first poem when I was 6. And when I was a teenager, like I compiled a whole notebook full of information on my favorite musician, which is sort of like an early journalistic effort.
Right.
And then when I was in college, I started working for the college paper. And I did interviews, mostly just all entertainment, entertainment in the arts.
Okay.
And I just sort of stayed with that. And eventually I got to make it a full-time job covering television for the Tribune Syndicate.
That's
incredible. I'm a TV baby. I didn't really grow up as a huge movie buff. I was more music and TV.
Right.
So TV, though, when you write about TV, because we didn't write about the industry, like Variety would, we wrote about the programs.
Right.
So you're writing about history, science, the arts, comedy, drama, reality.
Right.
You write about TV, you pretty much write about everything.
Right.
So I've got a pretty broad-based background. I've talked to like senators and homicide detectives and astronomers and just along with actors and writers and directors and producers and all that stuff.
That's fascinating because you have like such a wide breadth of knowledge and experience.
Well, yeah, because one week you might be writing about a PBS documentary, the next week a network sitcom. You might do a TV movie based on a real story, an interview like a helicopter pilot who led a crazy chase. It was never dull. My appointment books, I've saved them. They're kind of fun and interesting to look at.
I bet. So at what point did you actually move to Los Angeles during this time?
I moved to LA in 2002.
Okay.
And I was with the syndicate until 2014.
Right.
And then I transitioned to freelancing. That's when I worked for Variety. But I'd kind of been doing social media because you have to as a journalist. You got to push your own stuff out there.
Right.
And I had taught my coworkers how to do it. So I was kind of looking to do something full-time other than journalism because it's just so crazy these days. And so I got this job doing social. And they're similar in a lot of ways. And we have a company blog that I write for. And I still do freelance pieces. And I have a blog at pathos.com.
Okay.
Called Pax Culturati. And I'm still covering TV and movies and doing all that stuff at the same time.
That's incredible. So,
and writing movies. I
was going to talk about that next because, now you have all this free time between social media and journalism.
What am I doing? What are any of us doing?
Absolutely. Promoting a movie coming out in October. So at what point did you kind of decide that you wanted to start your screenwriting career? Was that something you always had planned early on?
Yeah, I always had it in the back of my mind. But because I worked for a newspaper syndicate, for a newspaper company, pitching story ideas to the industry you're covering would be problematic. And I had never really thought about writing movies because I came out of TV. And for a while I was working with David Milch, the producer of Deadwood and Hill Street Blues and stuff, who was sort of giving me some writing tutoring, and he's very encouraging. So I'm trying to figure out how can I do this,
Right.
So, but when I wasn't working for the syndicate anymore, I'm like, oh. So I wrote a pilot that went around town And then I got the idea. I listened to a seminar about writing movies. I thought, maybe I'll try that. Maybe I'll try that. And the first one I wrote got optioned. It's been optioned and re-optioned, and knock on wood will be made. And the second one is out to a production company. A friend of mine shopped it out to them. And the third one, I have somebody at a cable company actually waiting on the first draft.
Oh, wow.
So I'm working, yeah. It's they're also looking at another one, but they're like waiting, send us the draft when you're finished it. Because I said, like, what kind of movie do I want to write? And I thought I'm going to do holiday movies because everybody loves like a Christmas movie. And under that umbrella, you can kind of tackle any kind of story you want,
Right.
But the one I'm working on now is actually a semi-Easter themed. It's not about Easter, but it takes place at that time of year and has some of those themes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, yeah, and then, we'll see later on whatever I feel like doing. But so far, knock on wood.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It seems like the holiday themed genre has always been so universal, so well liked, from audiences all over the world that it's definitely one, not that anything is bankable anymore, but it seems to be one of those genres that has always had a special place in people's hearts. So,
well, it's sort of like the perennial journalism story, like the Be Careful at Halloween story and the How to Pick a Christmas Tree story. You have a time of the year that people are interested in that kind of thing automatically, whatever holiday it is.
Right.
And under the umbrella of, say, Christmas movie, you can do a comedy, you can do a drama, you can do a science fiction movie, you can do like a mystery. There's just all kinds of things you can do under the general umbrella. I mean, It's a Wonderful Life is a drama. That's a Christmas movie. Elf is a Christmas movie. I mean, there's just all kinds of movies that fall under that umbrella.
Absolutely.
But it gives you what's that thing they call in entertainment, that pre-sold. It has that pre-sold element. And that there's a time of year that people are looking for that kind of thing.
Absolutely, and it's what they call, I guess, evergreen stories. It's like they just never get old, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting because
I consider Die Hard to be a Christmas movie, but that's just me.
No, that's not just you. That's a lot of people, including myself. I think considering it anything other than a Christmas movie is,
exactly. I mean, exactly.
Yeah. So it's definitely, by far one of the best Christmas movies. Yes, there's action in it. I'll give you that, but it is, in my opinion, it is a tried and true Christmas family story.
And in the end, you've got a couple whose marriage was falling apart who come back together. I mean, that's the uniting of a family. I mean, like, come on, what do you want?
Yeah.
Plus explosions.
And especially when she punches the reporter in the end, that was kind of fun too. So yeah, I want to dive back into sort of your process now, because a lot of the folks that watch MMFM Digital are, sort of aspiring screenwriters and folks that want to get into the creative side of the business as well. So, and I know every process is different, but can you talk a little bit about your process as a screenwriter? What sort of routines and things can you share with our audience in terms of how you get a script written?
Of course, I'm just beginning as a screenwriter, so don't I can better quote people I know. One advantage of being a journalist is that you get to interview a lot of people in the business, and you get to see how the business works, what it's like on a set, what it takes to shoot something, how difficult a simple thing can become. And over the years, and having sort of off the record conversations with people who become friends of mine, including David, who was very helpful. You sort of get into their mind a little bit and understand how their world works. So I'm not coming into it with no understanding of how the business works. I know how the business works. And I've been on a lot of sets. I can see how difficult or easy things can be made depending what you put in a script. You could write in a script, 2 armies clash. I mean, that's 3 words. That's probably 3 weeks of filming and several $1 million. The casting, whatever. Yeah. So as I'm writing, I'm thinking about the kind of story I want to tell, and mostly I start with people. A person has a problem, And that's what my story is about.
Right.
In the first one, you have a guy who has, some issues, and they all come to the head at Christmas time. So it's wrapped in that. But I start with a character who has an issue that I want to deal with.
Right. Right.
And as I'm writing it, I'm thinking, what market is this going to be for? What potential budget? So I'm not writing strictly to budget, but I'm thinking, don't get nuts. You can always add things,
right?
But try to think like, what's the potential budget for this? How can I write it in a way that it's shootable for that budget? Because you can always get nutty later if you want. You can always hire more expensive. So sort of my thought is, knowing what happens during production, try to solve their problems yourself ahead of time, rather than having them hire somebody later to solve the problem.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about it's not ruling how I'm telling the story, but I'm thinking about it.
Right.
Like,
No,
the first movie, there were a couple of scenes that they said this might be too expensive, and I'm like, actually, I could take that scene and move it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And always have an alternative. It's like in journalism, you learn to work fast and fluidly. You learn to work to deadline. You will sit down and you will write.
Right.
You don't have an option not to. That's a good training.
Right.
Then I'm sort of on a deadline on this new movie, and so I think I did like 15 pages this weekend, and there will have to be many more done. I know in my head where I'm going, but that idea of sitting down, putting your hand down, and you will produce something.
Yeah.
A lot of, you can get into the trap of procrastination. Everybody does.
Yeah.
Journalism doesn't allow that.
I wanted to go there because, a lot of writers have a specific routine. So they'll wake up and they say from 8 to 9 every morning I write. Do you have a specific routine, or do you more or less kind of have whenever the inspiration hits you, just kind of break away and write?
I type a lot, so I'm not fond of typing if I don't have to. And even with a journalism story, I do a ton of research first and think about it. The writing is actually the quickest part. So with the screenwriting, I'm thinking about the story a lot. I'm playing with ideas. And when the ideas gelled in my mind and I kind of know where I'm going, at least in the short term, then I sit down and write. And it always comes out a little differently when you write it. But I'm not one for wanting to write many drafts. But the story I'm working on now, there were some, not the main storyline, but there were some elements in it that actually have been blown up by what's happened with COVID. Where if the movie is shot a year, 2 years from now, people are going to go, oh, come on, that wouldn't happen. Because the world's changing. So it's like not being wedded to that, but thinking about it. Like, how can I put elements in that achieve the same end, but are likely also to be true in 2 years?
No, you're right. And we talked about evergreen, and something that's topical now is COVID and how people are social distancing, the mask. Those are all things that, it could be interesting for the first couple movies out the gate. I know Michael Bay is shooting one right now with that theme sort of written into
But a
the
year
movie.
from now, 2 years from now, what's the world going to be like?
Correct.
It's like one thing that Milch told me that I've always sort of stuck with is when you're writing a story, incidents, things that happen, he characterized them as rocks thrown into a pond. Someone dies, someone blows up a building, boom, boom, a rock. And he always said this, your story is not the rocks. Your story is the ripples. So thinking if what's happened with COVID and the lockdowns and the effect on businesses, the effect on cities, all the things we're seeing, the exodus from some cities, people changing jobs, I have friends that are moving out of LA like crazy because they can't get a job or whatever it is. What's the ripples of that? And how will those ripples going out affect this individual I'm writing the story about? How's it going to affect her life? And what problems a year or 2 years from now is she going to be dealing with that are the real life ripples of what's happening now? And I've always sort of held on to the story is in the ripples. Like a hurricane hitting a town is the rock. And you can do a movie about rocks, like Twister is mostly about rocks. It's mostly about tornadoes. It's also about a couple coming back together, which almost every disaster movie is. But it doesn't, the nature of it, it doesn't deal with the long-term effects on a community of being hit by a tornado. But then Ron Howard just did Rebuilding Paradise, which was about the terrible Paradise Fire, I think in 2018 in Northern California that wiped out a town. He deals with the fire, but most of his movie deals with everything that happens afterward.
Wow.
To the town, to the people coming back, people not coming back, politics, economics. So that's a story told in the ripples. An action movie is more like Rocks.
Right.
A movie like that is more like ripples.
Wow, that's fascinating. And I never actually thought about it that way, but it makes a lot of sense.
It does, because like a tornado hits a town and you could pick like one of 50 people in that town and tell a story about how that tornado affected their lives going forward. I lost my house, my wife died, I was injured, whatever it is. And I'm not really, I don't think I have the skill set or the inclination to write action movies. So I'm more like into characters.
Yeah.
So I think I would live more in the ripples.
Absolutely.
Than the Rocks.
We should pitch you a story about the aftermath of Hurricane Andrew. That would be interesting.
Well, truly, but a lot of times you don't see them because, your big tentpole movies are going to be about rocks. But I will point you, though, to one of my early obsessions during the lockdown was watching all of the Marvel movies, omitting the first Iron Man, which you may. Just watch the post-credit sequence with Robert Downey Jr. on YouTube, and you're good.
There you go.
And watching them all at once, realize that everything that happens to Tony Stark in the second Iron Man movie, the one with Tony Stark. I'm sorry, not the first Iron Man movie, the first Hulk.
Right.
But everything, omit that one. But everything that happens to Tony Stark in that first Iron Man movie plays out through the course of the entire series. And it ends as the redemption story of Tony Stark.
Right.
That is a heck of a ripple.
Right, absolutely.
Because all of the crises that happen, he's thinking about, I'm an arms manufacturer, should I keep doing that? The moral issues, and then I built this suit, and all of that plays out, rippled through all of the films. And in the end, Tony Stark is the one who saves the day.
Right.
Paying off all of those incidents that happened to him in that first movie. I think it's kind of genius.
Oh, absolutely.
It's one of the best examples of, through big, huge superhero action movies, that you can pay off a character like that in such a satisfying way, because that doesn't always happen.
No, you're right, it doesn't. And I think it took a very smart creative team to kind of plant those seeds early on, knowing what the overall arc, not only of Iron Man, but the entire saga and how all these different stories would finally come together. And it's really just one man. Yeah.
They were sometimes shooting those post-credit, those little sequences at the end of each movie before the next movie was shot. And sometimes before it was fully cast. And sometimes before it was fully written. Wow. So what a high wire act they pulled off.
And
like even in the movie I'm working on, as I call it discover things. Of course I make them up, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like discovering. I'm going in and backfilling into the early parts of the story to make sure that something I want to pay off later is planted in a way that it's available to me to pay off later.
Wow.
So you're moving forward, but you're occasionally hopping back. Because like I might know something in my head about a character, but to make sure it's somewhere on the page.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Because you get lost in your head.
You get lost in your own head, and you assume that the audience or the reader will know it, but oftentimes you have to put it in there so that they can go aha. You always want those aha moments in the movie, right? Where the audience goes, oh, that's why the thing happened.
Having been edited so often over the years as a journalist, because you send out your story and newspaper editors will do what they want with it. And then you'll get, maybe if you're lucky enough to have a copy editor, you'll get copy edited. You begin to self-edit and sort of realize that if I don't put Joe Smith's whole name in the first paragraph, and I forget that, or it gets cut out, and I just call him Smith later, nobody's going to know who he is.
Right.
So to make sure when you go through that final read, make sure all the pieces are there in the proper order and that the information is rolled out to the reader in the correct order so that everything is intelligible to them as they go. I've read stories that are very disjointed and I can't follow it, and that's structure. Right. And movies, I've discovered, because I'm still learning, like a good journalism story, are all about structure. Right. How you roll out information, in what order, how you put in like a humorous bit or a serious bit. It's the same with editing a news story, editing a documentary. Right. Like watching Cray, watching when, first time they did, like the way everything flows through it. So information, something more personal, something funny, something dramatic. There's a rhythm to it as well.
Yeah, no, there definitely is. And there's a rhythm to life stories. There's a rhythm to how audiences pick up information. And obviously it's the job of the writer and the folks on the creative side of things to make sure that that's told in the most interesting way possible, right? And
yeah, you look at a Marvel movie in the middle of a battle. Yeah. It will all go quiet so two characters can have a personal conversation. Absolutely. Does that really happen in a giant battle? No, probably not. But the audience needs that if it's done well. If a movie like that is done well, and these were done well, except for Captain Marvel. We won't talk about Captain Marvel. The audience needs that breather. Absolutely. Needs that moment of emotional connection in the midst of all the bing, bang, boom, bang.
Right. No, you're absolutely right, and I think it's in those quiet moments that you really can draw the audience in, because when you see these sort of spectacle movies, and if it's like you said, just too much action for too long, it really kind of tunes you out more or less, right? Because it's like it starts to feel repetitive. Yeah, it's overload of the senses.
So whether you're writing an essay or a poem or a journalism story or whatever you're doing. Storytelling is storytelling. Yeah. And it has a rhythm and it has a structure. And it's a cooperative medium. It's not like, throwing paint upon a painting and calling it whatever, study in red number 4 and you figure it out. Right. Writing's not like that. Writing demands of the reader attention, whether they're reading or watching. And if they're not getting what you're saying, then you didn't say it right. It's not, if they're not understanding you, then you're wasting their time and you've wasted yours. Absolutely. So, it's not, you can't be Picasso if you're a writer. You can't be a jazz musician if you're a writer. You're a craftsman. Right.
No, that's very well said. And I'm so excited that, our listeners got to hear this. This half hour has just flown by. I wish we had more time to go into more depth, but I think we covered a lot in this half hour, Kate. So thank you so much for doing this. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, and again, the movie is called Pray the movie, right? And it's
called Pray, the story of Patrick Payton. The website is also PrayTheFilm.com. We're coming to theaters in October, and then later on you'll be able to see it on streaming. And I love a good documentary. And people who know me know I don't say I like things if I don't. And even though this is my company that made this, it's really good. It's really good.
Yeah, just so the trailer. I'm excited because of the way, this priest that literally, like I said, came out of nowhere and landed in Hollywood and just became this
little
huge
town in nowhere.
Yeah.
He's from a town like this big in the west of Ireland. It's crazy. And my favorite bit of the story that he talked himself into an hour on national radio. And they're like, you have to have a star. And he's like, who are the stars? So someone said, I don't know, Bing Crosby. He cold called Bing Crosby at home. And he said yes.
Wow.
That's crazy. It's crazy.
Sometimes they say ignorance is bliss, right?
You don't know what you can't do, so you just do it anyway.
Just do it anyway. That's another sort of classic Hollywood story, and how folks come out of nowhere and just do almost what seems the impossible, especially by the more sort of experienced, jaded types. And someone just comes in with a fresh idea and a fresh perspective and a bit of optimism, and you see how far they go, right?
And every now and then he'd work with someone who maybe didn't have the most pristine past. It's Hollywood, People would go, do you want to work with that person? He'd go, don't worry. It'll be good for them.
There you go. Spoken like a true priest. I love
Yep, there you go.
Well, Kate, again, this has been great. I'm just going to sign off to the audience. I'll put you on standby, and then I'll say bye to you. But again, thank you so much for taking the time, and I'm sure we got a lot out of it. I'll be right back.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, that was Kate O'Hare. What a great session. I'm so excited she got to talk about her film. Really excited to see that. Hopefully it does come to theaters in Miami. We'll keep you posted with links as the film gets close to its release date. And of course, we will keep you posted on our next guest, our next session next week, which will be exciting as well. And of course, I am your host, J.O. Martinez. And until the next time, as I always say, happy streaming.